Welcome to CityWise. I'm your host, Tiana Stevens. CityWise is produced by the City of Rochester to shine a spotlight on city living at its best. Well, Mayor Lovely Warren and Police Chief Michael Simonelli are calling on members of the community to become active partners with the Rochester Police Department as it transitions to a new neighborhood-based patrol model. PAC TAC stands for Police and Citizens Together Against Crime, and it's one of the many opportunities for citizens and officers to work together. Joining us today is Vincent Agnone, Crime Prevention Officer with the Rochester Police Department, and PAC TAC volunteer Marty Petrella to tell us more. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What is the history of PAC TAC? How did it get started?
PAC TAC started in the city of Rochester in about 1973, and at the time it was a paid position to the volunteers, and then in 1975 they stopped because they couldn't pay it anymore, and then about 10 years later it came back as a volunteer-based program.
Mm-hmm. And Marty, you've been volunteering for about 4 years.
Yes.
Tell us about yourself and why do you do this?
Well, I've been a city resident for the last 14 or 15 years, and I've always seen either PAC TAC patrollers in other neighborhoods or the red shirts downtown.
Sure.
And when I asked the red shirts, how do you get involved in community security, they said, you can do PAC TAC. And then when I moved to Cornhill, they had a very active organization, and that's how I got started there.
So if somebody doesn't know, they're not familiar with PAC TAC, what exactly is it? How does it work?
PAC TAC is a volunteer. It's relative to where you live in the city, and you basically work with the crime prevention officers and the other officers in the area, and you walk and are just high visibility, eyes and ears, extra patrol out in the streets that you live.
Now, does every neighborhood in Rochester have its own PAC TAC?
Every sector in the city has their own PAC TAC program, and based on where you live, you can walk wherever you want in that sector.
What sort of training did you have to undergo to do this? Is there training involved?
There is formal training. We worked with Vinny to come in and go through a training program, the do's and don'ts of what you want to do while you're on patrol, what to look out for, how to operate the radios, because you do have a radio with the city dispatcher while you're on patrol, and then we would walk our first few patrols with experienced PAC TACers, so we would get the gist of what you do while you're out on patrol.
So you get the radio. What other sort of things, tools does the city provide?
The city provides a outer garment that displays the PAC TAC logo, flashlights if necessary, but like Marty said, we give them the radio, which gives them a direct link to us in case they find or encounter something while they're walking.
Now, are walks in the evenings? How are those organized?
We try to have scattered times throughout the day. Usually there's 3 or 4 patrols per week. Some people walk during the day. Most people work during the evening hours, 6 to 10. Myself, I've been getting out with volunteer 5 to 7 a.m. a few times a month. So try to mix it up so we're not so predictable.
Sure.
When we'll be on the street.
What are the things that you look for when you're on a PAC TAC patrol?
Well, what we advise them to look for is just any type of activity that may appear to be suspicious, and that can range from anything from seeing people walking through a parking lot looking into car windows, or groups gathering doing something that may appear to be something suspicious. We advise them to call it in or contact us, let us know about anything that they encounter while they're walking. That could be anything from, like I said, the groups, or it could be a street light out. Anything like that is something that we want reported so that we can help make the neighborhood better where they live.
What are some of the don'ts that you mentioned?
Well, you certainly don't want to engage anyone directly. If there's something happening, you want to call it in on the radio. You don't have to pursue and foot chase or try to apprehend somebody. Mostly it's to call things in and to alert the police to come. You might stick around or be asked to stick around to help out, but certainly don't get involved. You don't carry weapons of any kind, things of that nature.
What is a typical walk like, if there's a typical walk?
My typical walks are pretty quiet, actually. We try to canvass the entire neighborhood looking for suspicious activity, but there's usually not a lot going on during those hours. As far as people on the street, especially early in the morning, people are just waking up. So if you see somebody lurking around or looking in cars or things like that, then we would call for patrol to come by and check it out. But a lot of times it's people stopping us on the street and asking us questions or telling us about something that happened previously, and then we try to educate the neighbors to call 911 if something is happening currently. If something has happened in the past, call 311 because you still want to report it. We publish crime prevention tips. We have neighborhood block parties to try to get people engaged. So a lot of it's more about community engagement than it actually is about the physical patrols. Because we don't have enough volunteers to cover, every day of the week at different times, but we do have a presence on the street, and people do notice that.
How important is community engagement in your work as a crime prevention officer?
It's very important. We work directly hand in hand with the community, and without their partnership, things wouldn't be as good as they are, and the neighborhoods that we are in. So any kind of relations we get with the community is always positive, and helping us solve crimes and having them as our eyes and ears is a big bonus.
How do you go about planning and organizing all these volunteers to cover the entire neighborhood?
We have a security committee in Cornhill, and we meet on a monthly basis. There's 5 or 6 neighbors that volunteer, along with the crime prevention officer and our patrol officers. We even get the captain and the police chief involved every once in a while when we have major concerns. And then we have a PAC TAC scheduler who then just schedules the volunteer patrols. Any other involvement, like neighborhood watch block captains, they disseminate information in emails. We have block parties. People come out and meet. So there's volunteers who help out with all those activities too.
And Cornhill is pretty organized and relatively a safe neighborhood. What are some of the programs that you think could be duplicated to other neighborhoods that you guys are doing, neighborhood watch, those sort of things?
Well, I know other neighborhood associations do similar things, like the Neighborhood of the Arts. I follow them, South Wedge, and any neighborhood association, even if you're not that formal, you could get a group of people together and work with the police to get a PAC TAC patrol. Neighborhood Watch, you can sign up online. It's a small registration fee to do that. So they have National Night Out every year where neighborhoods band together and promote safety and security. So there's a lot of things that the people in the community can do that it takes maybe a little bit of digging and asking some questions, but there's plenty of answers out there for them.
Okay. Now, can anybody volunteer to work on a PAC TAC?
Yep, depending on where you live, you would contact that area's neighborhood service center and just let the crime prevention officers know there that you want to be involved in PAC TAC, and then you would get an application process, and then at some point you would get contacted by the crime prevention officer to set up a training. The training's about an hour and a half long, where we would sit down in a classroom type, open forum type setting and go over those rules and regulations and the do's and don'ts, and then from there, like Marty said, you go on the training walks with other PAC TAC volunteers and crime prevention officers to kind of get the feel for how it would normally go, radio training and things like that.
Can you think of any particular story, success story that was a direct result of PAC TAC interaction?
Numerous times in Cornhill alone, we've had PAC TAC volunteers come across people trying to break into houses by like banging on doors or breaking into cars. I also run the PAC TAC program downtown through the Damon Community College, and I have students that have come across fights and people smoking drugs. So they're always out there, and they see a lot more than I would see in a patrol car because I stand out a lot more. But as the volunteers on foot can go around, they see a lot more stuff and can interact a lot better with the community than I could in a police car, and get us to where we need to go if they see something suspicious.
Marty, how important is it in working with business owners in the neighborhood?
It is very important because we have a few businesses in the neighborhood where we've had some issues lately with fights after events and things like that. And immediately the business owners and operators were pulled into the conversation to try to come up with a solution for it. We had some break-ins over on Exchange Street last year and the year before, so we'd stop in and talk to the business owners to see if there's any other issues or concerns that they have. Again, because we could then bring it to our CPO and say, hey, we stopped into this business and they had these concerns, and they might be too busy or apprehensive on contacting the police themselves. But the PAC TACers usually are more proactive about it.
Right. Is there anything that you've learned in your 4 years of doing PAC TAC, and you're active with your neighborhood association, that you didn't know before?
Well, I certainly got to see more about how the police interactions with the community are. I've never really had that much involvement before. We had some particular instances of issues that arose, and just working with the police to try to figure out how to solve them really showed me how being proactive about crime rather than reactive is a good thing to do.
Why do you think this is important for Rochester?
I really think any kind of community involvement is good for the city, whether it's security or helping neighbors in any way that you can. The city is people. It's engaging people to do things. So if it's not security, anything that you do with food banks or clothing drives or community gardening, picking things up, making the place a better place to live. So it's all tied in. We try to not look at it just as PAC TAC as security, but as a community involvement in bettering our neighborhood.
Sure. And Officer Agnew, finally, do you know how many PAC TACers we have throughout the city of Rochester?
Citywide, I don't know, but currently because I'm responsible for 2 areas, currently I have 31 students that walk for Damon every semester, and I believe there's 40 or so active volunteers in the Cornhill area currently right now. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Again, if you'd like more information about PAC TAC, you can visit the City of Rochester's website, cityofrochester.gov/PAC TAC, or call 428-7496.